Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast, and now yet another interview from WHOOVERVILE, this time with Andrew Cartmell. His voice was a little croaky as this interview was done towards the end of the day, and he'd been talking for hours. So now over to me and my colleagues from the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance as we interview the script editor of the McCoy era, that is, Andrew Cartmell. Hello, Andrew Carp.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Michael, host of the Tin Dog podcast. This is Chris.
I'm on the Feros Project podcast.
And I'm Jean from Staggering Stories podcast.
So this is going to be a shared broadcast.
Yes.
Podcast love.
Is Tin Dog K9 then?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was one of the few things that had been in the old and new series, so I thought, I'll have that name.
I was wondering if it was an anagram. I was trying to work out what it might be standing for.
Well, I'll be sat through the whole interview trying to work something out now. Stop it, I know how your mind works.
Doting.
Exactly. Well done.
Sorry, yeah.
First finish, yes, well done. Well done.
So Andrew,
Hi.
welcome.
Thank you.
How are you enjoying it so far?
Oh, it's good. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
They said keep it short, and we will endeavour to do just that, because you'll be exhausted after being bombarded with 1,000 questions, many of which are all about a master plan.
Fine. Well, the thing about the master plan was that there never was anything called that until years after we had finished the show. The term arose after the show, but the thing it described certainly did exist, and it was mostly an impulse just to refresh the Doctor, to make him more mysterious, to make him more formidable. Or even formidable.
So were you happy with the direction the Virgin novels and the BBC books took the Seventh Doctor afterwards? Because there were definite touches of that, because it was reflecting your work.
I think that it began to build on it, but then it probably became a bit more diffuse, and which is understandable because I wasn't editing at the time. I didn't have editorial control. So I don't see it as being a really direct continuation of what I would have done.
But unnoticeable sound effect.
Dun, dun, dun. We're talking about the master plan. Last year there was that crowdfunding project for the fan fiction illustrator.
That's still out there. It's the thing about crowdfunding is sometimes the crowd funds it more quickly than others. So it's just ticking over. We're just waiting to see what happens. So the project's alive, but it's comatose.
Oh, would you be able to explain what we can expect from it?
There was a guy called Hans Christian Wang. It sounds like I'm making this up, but I'm not. He's Danish. He's a very nice bloke. He's sort of a fan who's turned professional, who publishes comics, and he approached me to do a Doctor Who comic, purely on a fan level, obviously, because he doesn't have a license. So he wanted to do a fanzine called Fan Fiction Illustrated. And I said, fine. And he said, we need to fund this, and we're going to crowdsource it. And that's where we're at now. That's what we're just waiting to find out. So beyond that, you know about as much as I do.
Because also, with when Big Finish, when they did the Lost Seasons, season 27.
That was great fun to do.
Was that close to how you originally envisaged season 27 would?
That's impossible to say, because season 27 we just had storylines, vague ideas, delightful notions, and several well worked out scenes, which mostly found their way into the finished product. I mean, one of the things that was completely different was what happened many years ago. Doctor Who magazine ran its own little article about the purported season 27, and the guy who was responsible for that article invented titles for the shows, which were not the titles we had, and I didn't want to use them, but David Richardson, who was the producer, insisted the fans would want titles like Earth Aid, animal, and so on. And so reluctantly I went along with them, but that's one difference right there. I never would have used any of those titles, except for Thin Ice, because I think that was Mark's preferred title.
It seems that Ace appeared more in season 27 than I originally imagined. I thought she would be leaving.
Yeah, now that was one of the great things about David Richardson. He was the producer at Big Finish. I knew that we were going to introduce a new companion called Rain in season 27, but I didn't want to lose Ace. And I was saying this to him. I said, it's great to have Rain, but I wish we had Ace. He said, well, we can do both. Which was lovely. I mean, he was thinking outside the box. But there again, that's a difference. In season 27 on the television, you would have run the companions in parallel only briefly, and then Ace would have had to retire. But this was better. So this was better than what it would have been on television.
But then we don't get Ace Time Lord.
Well, that was a storyline that Mark Platt and Ben Aronovich both keenly favoured, and I think I can see why it's an idea that people love. Personally, I never liked Time Lord stories, because then you got the whole problem about the Doctor being just a Time Lord. Obviously, I had some workarounds for that, but I just wanted to circumvent the Time Lord as much as possible. So that's a case of something not being my first preference.
You say you had some workarounds. Are you still keeping them up your sleeve in order to use them at some other point?
No, not really. I mean, the idea was we were stuck with the notion that he was a Time Lord, but then we began to argue that he'd actually existed before that. He was more than just a Time Lord. Those allusions are scattered throughout seasons 25 and 26, aren't they? Yeah.
Did you have an ultimate goal for what you wanted to make?
Just to make him a mystery. So in the sense there was no ultimate goal, I just took it as far as him being, us not knowing anything about him, pushing him back into the shadows of mystery and enigma. And at that point you leave it, because if you push him back out of the shadows, back into the light and have an explanation, then you've defeated the whole purpose of the exercise.
It's like what they did to Wolverine. As soon as you find out who he is, it's all suddenly less interesting.
But I really like the new Wolverine, the latest movie. I thought it was excellent. A lot of people don't like it, but I think it's the best Wolverine thing out yet. There's a screenwriter called Scott Frank involved who's just terrific. I love that movie.
I think not Andrew Cartmell, that's yourself, but Paul Cornell.
It's him.
That's him.
The other one, talk about something else.
Actually, speaking of Cornell, I think he was the first person who... I was at a convention in Los Angeles many years ago, and he said, "Have you ever heard the term the Cartmel master plan?" I said no, and that was my first introduction to it.
How do you feel about it being named after you? The Cartmel master plan.
It's great. Anything with my name, as long as they spell it right.
So is that one L or two?
Well, that's a very serious question, because there is an Andrew Cartmell with two L's who works at the BBC. He does the music shows. He does things like the Eurovision Song Contest. And I've spoken to him. He's a really nice bloke, but as you can imagine, that has created some complications and confusions over the years. So correct spelling is crucial.
I imagine you've had to build up quite a good relationship in exchanging each other's misplaced emails.
I once rang him up and said we should meet, but if we shake hands, the universe might explode.
Last year or the year before, there was that somebody found an old copy of an old book, and it ended up on Newsnight because of the whole Mrs. Thatcher Happiness Patrol thing. Was that a surprise? That Newsnight ended up focusing on an old show from the past?
No, it was extraordinary. Well, you have to remember, never trust a journalist. I hate to say this, but it's true, because this guy rang up and he got in touch through my agent, and the notion was that Sylvester was doing something on radio and he wanted some background on Sylvester. This is the story I was told. And then he interviewed me, and I think he was talking about that stuff about me being very anti-Thatcherite, which is all true. But I didn't realise that perhaps he wasn't planning that, but then he thought this is a much better angle. So, the BBC is full of commies, tried to overthrow Mrs. Thatcher, etc. And I woke up on Sunday morning and I started getting these emails saying things like, well, good for you, mate, or have you seen the papers? And I thought, what? Because I'd actually gone up to buy that. I think it was the Telegraph, that I had interviewed me. So I went up to buy the Telegraph, and I looked all through the arts section, the television, the media section, and there's nothing there. I thought, they just haven't run the story. Then I discovered it was on page 3 of the news section, and it was in all the papers, it was all online everywhere, and I tell you what, you feel such sympathy for anybody who's ended up in the headlights of publicity, because you have no control over it. They can say anything that they want, and it's just out of control, So I felt terribly sorry for people like poor old Kate Moss or anyone who's been in that glare. It's quite an experience. And the Newsnight thing was great because that was kind of that was my salvation in a way, because they invited me to come on Newsnight, I think it was the following night or maybe the night after, very quickly. And unlike the printed press where they can just make up anything they want, if you're actually appearing on television or on the radio, apart from some heavy-handed editing, what you say is what goes out. So that was good. It was good to have a chance. I was on with this guy, this politician, and the thing about being a politician is you're trained not to let the other person speak. So I think I got about 7 words out there, but at least the 7 words were my own words, and after that everything calmed down. It was a very savvy move by the BBC to take the bull by the horns and just address the thing frontally like they did. And I thought it was great in the end, and I was quite pleased to be assigned the notion of this kind of insurrectionist.
Did it boost sales of the book?
What book?
Wasn't there...
There was no book connected with that.
Did it boost the sales of your books in general?
If anything, no.
Oh.
No, that's a shame.
And Newsnight didn't even pay me an appearance fee. So they do that now, though. They're doing that now.
Someone's mouthing me something, and I'm not very
I
good
deny
at
everything.
reading. Would you like to come and join us?
No. I don't know if you know. Re-releasing Script Doctor.
Yes,
It's great because Script Doctor's been out of print for a number of years now, and people love the book, and I love that book. I'm very proud of it. And it should be out, if I can get my finger out and do the proofreading, it should be out before Christmas.
That's the one I meant. I just assumed it was still out there.
No, it had been out of print from Reynolds and Hearn probably for a couple of years by then, sadly. So there's no way I could... Yes, you're right. I wish I could have cashed in on that somehow, but I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're talking about books. I understand that you recently did a novel based on The Prisoner.
I did a novel based on The Prisoner, and I tell you it was about 5 years ago now. And what happened was there's this guy in America. He runs a printing company called Powers Press. His name is Matteo Latosa, and he was incredibly nice, incredibly helpful publisher. He paid me really well, paid me up front, incredibly honest and helpful. And I delivered the book, and we did 2 limited edition 100-copy print runs to sell at conventions. And then he was supposed to print it properly and put it out there, and it's just never happened. And I keep pursuing it. I don't know what the hell's going on. As I say, he was a very nice bloke. He dealt with me very well in every respect except printing the book. So the book is now been out there for 5 years in a limited edition. It's a terrific novel. If you like The Prisoner, I did a really good job on that. I loved The Prisoner, and it was a really good novel written as a kind of pastiche of 1960s spy novels like Len Dayton or Adam Hall, the Quiller novels. And it's a terrific book, but I'm beginning to doubt that it'll ever see the light of day. So if you know any way of prevailing on that guy to finally publish it, please do.
And that was Miss Freedom?
It's called Miss Freedom.
Miss Freedom.
Yeah, and it's a groovy little book, and I'm sure there's a market for it. And I love The Prisoner.
Yeah.
So that's a really strange debacle. Who knows what's going on there?
So that's things you've done in the past. What are you working on at the minute, other than getting out of your getting a drink?
I'm mostly writing novels these days, and I'm working on crime novels. I've done a series of 3. I'm working on a series of crime novels. I've written 3 of them so far, and we're looking to launch those. It's about a record collector turned sleuth, and it's called The Vinyl Detective. That's sort of the name of him. But recently I've started working on another novel. It's a suspense novel, very much in the mould of Patricia Highsmith. I don't know if anybody's ever read the Ripley books. So I'm about halfway through that, and that's a totally different thing. Again, it's like a crime novel, but it might end up being a mainstream literary novel. So that's where I am, writing novels at the moment.
Okay, and anything else left to give Big Finish?
Oh, I'd love to do some more work with Big Finish. I'm hoping... I sit by the phone and I hope they ring. And it'll be lovely if they do, because they did a fantastic job on the ones we did, as I said, with David as the producer, and it was just lovely working with Sylvan and Sophie again. So I hope there is more of those, or indeed any other audio adventures, because I love writing. It's like writing a radio play.
If you were invited back to do Big Finish, is there any particular character or alien that you would like to be able to treat or deal with?
Well, I loved writing Rain. I'd like to write some more Rain adventures. I love their idea of spinning off Jago and Lightfoot from Wang Chang. They're very imaginative in what they come up and do with that stuff. So there's all these wonderful spin-off characters who might be great to write about. Also, they took all the characters from Remembrance of the Daleks, haven't they? So they're very imaginative. The thing I love best is writing for Sylvan and Sophie, just because I think they're such a great team. But really, anybody in the universe that we created on the 3 years on the show would be a pleasure to do.
So, can I just say thank you very much for talking to us, and well, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its connected properties are copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. Whostrology, a Time Traveller's Almanac, is available through Telos Publishing or Amazon. Visit www.whostrology.com for further information. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.